Again, thanks for being here.
Good to be here. I love Toronto.
Yeah, you're frequently here. You're always here for Canadian Music Week, and I witnessed a few of your panels. Okay, so in my intro, I mentioned everyone reads you. It's a must-read. You have a podcast on SiriusXM. You travel the world to go to conferences. And viewed from the present, this does not seem like unusual activity. Everyone has a podcast who's an expert. Everyone has a Substack, except you've been doing it for 30 years. And talk about being ahead of the curve. So I guess my first question, I know my first question is, how did you do it? How did you build this thing? Why did you do it? And why did you think you could? Why did you think people would want to hear what you have to say?
Well, let's start with the newsletter, which is fall of 1986. I was working for an English management company called Sanctuary Music. Probably people here are too young to know all the changes that went through. Long past my tenure, Merck Mercuriadis, who you might know because he is from Canada and he's involved in publishing with Hypnosis, he worked there, they went public, it crashed, but the two main guys still manage Iron Maiden. I came in with a band called Wasp. Make a long story very short, I lost my job over a creative issue, and that's the kind of job you can't spend $1 because you're working 24/7. And in the ensuing 2 years, I worked on a couple of movies, and then I ran out of money. I started the newsletter, and in terms of being a writer, let me start right here. I first and foremost see myself as a writer. I see myself a writer more than I have a radio show on Sirius, and my podcast is with iHeart. It's on all the platforms. And I love doing that, but first and foremost, I'm a writer. And I guess I have to tell this story. I wanted to be a writer. I went to college in Vermont, a place called Middlebury College, and the guy who taught creative writing wrote C stories badly, and I never wrote another thing. But then working in the music business, you used to get bios. Bios, generally speaking, are horse shit. It's for people who really know nothing. A lot of times you'll see information, a lot of times in a newspaper, newspapers mean so much less today, they'll send the bio and they'll print from the bio. Whereas anybody who knows anything doesn't really read the bio. But we would get bios if you were big enough, you get an independent PR person, and the label would pay for it. And they always gave the worst person the job of writing the bio, and they couldn't write. And I would always have to rewrite them. Then I ran out of money, went to a job counselor. There's a legendary book called What Color Is Your Parachute? And there's a workbook, which I never knew about. It said, write 6 essays and brag about yourself. This was 12 years after I graduated from college, 14 years after I'd taken that writing course, and I'd never written another thing. And the job counselor says, brag about yourself. So I write it, I get back in touch with the fact that I like to write. I write stuff, I send it to magazines, and I realize, wait a second, this is just like the music business. You gotta know these people. So I'm eating a hamburger at a place that no longer exists at Pico and Sepulveda, which is a known intersection in LA, and I'm reading Billboard. I go, this is terrible. I could do a better job than this. Now, Billboard has gone up and down since then. It got a little bit better with this guy, Timothy Whitey, unfortunately passed away. It's become a consumer-facing publication. It's a joke now. And I scared myself. I said, I think there's a way to do this. I never used a computer, nothing. I had a credit card from being a lawyer with $5,000 credit. I got an Apple Macintosh. I got really into computers, really into it. I'm the type of person, more of a autodidact, they say, where I study and learn by myself. So I started the newsletter in the fall of '86, primarily to get another job in the music business. Astoundingly to me, only the most successful people subscribed because they could hear contrary opinions, and I could tell you story after story about that. To make a long story once again very short, 14 years later in the year 2000, I go every year, I'll go again this year to this conference in Aspen, Colorado, and for the first time ever, they gave email contact lists. And I sent something, and then there was a new book about David Geffen that I had a weekend before anybody else. And I sent it to my list, and the virality blew my mind. And then I said, okay, I'm gonna stop doing print, but you can't be added to the list until everybody's subscription, I won't open it up further until everybody's subscription runs out, because they were paying for a subscription. Let me start on a couple of things, side notes that are very important here. Content is not king. You'll hear this all the time. Content is not king. Distribution is king. So distribution, if someone can't see it, someone can't hear it, someone can't listen to it, doesn't matter how good it is. It's about distribution. My newsletter is free. Goes around the world. There's people on Substack. A friend of mine's in a well-known band. She says, well, you should be there. You can make some money, blah, blah, blah. If I charge it, I'm ruining my distribution. I've made tons more money giving it away for free than I did for charging it. But to continue in the year 2000, we're recording this, so there's certain things I shouldn't say. I'll make a long story very short. In that, Napster came along. I happened to be a lawyer. I was the expert on Napster. I did not open the newsletter to anybody being able to sign up till 2005. There were a lot of things about being in the public figure, if I want to say that, interacting with public, that is well known now. You know, they do hate tweets on Jimmy Kimmel, but at that time it was not. Every day, my inbox, I just sent something this morning, I could read my email. People saying you're a shithead and people saying you're God. It really puts you through changes. So I've done this newsletter in terms of opportunities that have come my way. I have not created any of them, okay? Let me go a couple of steps further. I'm sure everybody here is on social media to a degree. A good percentage of things on social media, I'm not talking about the influencers where that is their main place to be, but people who are selling music or something, they're hyping themselves all the time. They're saying, oh, I'm on TV. Oh, I come from a completely different era. I think that leaves a bad taste in people's mouths because if they're really a dedicated fan, they know that. And in my case, I can reach you directly with my newsletter. So what I learned back in the 90s is if I try to sell myself, I can't convince anybody because my act is just too wild, okay? So people come to me. I'm on Sirius because they came to me. I'm on iHeart because they came to me. There were a couple of predecessor companies that came to me before that. I did not lift a finger. I didn't call anybody. I didn't see. As a result, am I leaving money on the table? Absolutely. But you have to ask yourself whether, I'm trying to think whether this joke I could tell would be too off color, so I won't tell it. The long money is where the money is, not the short money. I can't tell you how many people I know got involved in the business. Okay, there's a Maroon 5, which is a big act. That was on this guy's label. I suddenly remember his name. He got covered in the Harvard Business Review, etc. The label was sold. He's out of the business. This guy was, I don't know if he was 30 at the time. Then he came up with a financial thing. That's it. Now, if his calling was just to make money, fine. But in terms of business, he took the money and it cut him off. So that's a long-winded answer to your question about how I got from there to here.
But thorough. Let me read a quote. It's a quote from you.
Okay, I realize. I never know what's going to come back.
Art is supposed to give us insight, reflect the human condition, but Hollywood makes superhero movies and musicians are all about sponsorships. Hell, both entities even feature corporate products in their wares. No wonder music does not drive the culture, because they're bankrupt just like our government. We need people we can trust who are on our side instead of fighting their petty little wars while they rape and pillage. So You talk about this a lot, about how music used to drive the culture. Like, maybe you can explain
Okay,
what
there are
you
a
mean
number
by
of
that.
things there. In the 60s and 70s, when so-called classic rock happened, I analogize that to the Renaissance. The Renaissance, 1600s, 1700s in Europe, happened once. Have they painted and sculpted since then? Absolutely. And if you follow art sales, you see a lot of this stuff is sold for ungodly amounts. So there is a representative and a physical art world. You cannot equate what happened with music in that time to today. Music in the 60s, 70s, there was radio, there was music, there wasn't anything else. And there were great breakthroughs. People are still making music today. What have we learned? We learned there's a lot of money there, okay? But we live in a money culture. If you talk to any established act, anybody who's been around for a while, they will all tell you they've gotten the letter from someone, I was gonna commit suicide, but I listened to your record and it got me through the night, okay? That is very different from entertainment. So you can go to a club, you can hear a good beat, you can say, oh, this is good, but something that speaks to your soul really resonates. You know, TikTok, what you have to know is every old person hates TikTok. I was at my accountant doing my taxes just last week, and she started testifying about Twitter, or now called X, and saying, well, you know, I like free speech, you know, and I started talking about it. I said, you ever been on? She goes, no. I said, well, it's totally different now. But not making it about Twitter, talking about TikTok. If you're on TikTok, you see forget the influencers selling products. You see people testifying as to the reality of their lives. It is riveting, which is why it becomes so addictive. That's an element, an essence that used to be in the music. But what you have to know about music, you cannot have a discussion about music whatsoever without mentioning this, is the game has completely changed. What used to be that recording was very expensive. Once again, distribution is everything. In the physical world, most stores would not stock independent records. And if you had an independent record and they stocked it, there's a famous story of this guy, Bobby Womack, great R&B musician. He had a record company called Beverly Glen Records. Had a million seller, put the company out of business. You say, how can that be? Because they kept shipping records, but they never got paid. So this was the game. You had to have a deep pocket with relationships in order to get on radio, get in print, in order to have a career. That's not the case at all anymore. Everybody, we can make a record right here, right now, and get it up on Spotify. Doesn't mean anybody's gonna listen to it, but we can get that, okay? So not only are you competing with the tsunami of people with no talent, not only are you competing with the people who are successful today, you're competing with the history of recorded music. This never used to exist because in a retail store, they could only stock a limited amount of product. So when your oldsters complain about today's royalty rates, usually inaccurately, if it were the pre-internet era, they wouldn't be making anything because the store wouldn't even stock their records or would stock a greatest hits and that's it. So we have an incredibly distorted world. The same thing is happening with inaccuracies on tickets, ticket prices, where we get a lot of people complaining that they can't make it in music. Most of these people, other than their parents, nobody wants to listen to them, okay? So you have those people. What does it take to be successful? Well, you know, you could work with other rappers and get a certain amount of notice, but if something is authentic, something has credibility, that's something that never goes away. That is something that we're always looking for. That is something that lasts. Let's talk about a Canadian, Joni Mitchell, the album Blue. Okay, that is seemingly bigger today than it was yesterday. You know, I could drink a case of you and still be on my feet. that has more resonance than most of the songs that come and go.
Do you think there are any drivers of the culture? I mean, is Taylor Swift driving culture? I mean, she makes the growth of a small country. Drake, Harry Styles, certainly perhaps driving fashion. I mean, are there anybody?
Well, I don't want to say these people don't have impact. Let's talk generally and then we'll talk specifically about those acts. Tech drove the culture from like 1998 to 2015 to 2018. I mean, there are jokes about this, where you brought the computer home from the store, it was immediately outdated. There were always new devices. There were new apps. That does not happen right now, okay? No, it's not like every week there's a new Spotify or a new Facebook, et cetera. It's really slowed down and they're a titan. So the story has become politics. Why is politics so interesting? Because of income inequality and other people protesting. Canada, you have the same thing. You know, out west, certain provinces are going right. We certainly have this in America. These are people who are left behind or sometimes ignorant. So this is something vital, okay? The music had that vitality, but something has changed along the way. There are a couple of things. Prior to like maybe 2014, 2013, if you made something great, it would surface. Today, there's so much in the marketplace. You could be the new Beatles and people wouldn't find you, okay? Having said that, Taylor Swift and Harry Styles. Again, I know Harry, Taylor wrote a song about me, so let's, put that in the mix. So, as big as they are smaller than the hit acts of ever before. I've been writing about this for over a year. Finally, The Guardian said the same thing. I'll use an example which you might understand. In the 60s, let's use the 60s when no one here was probably alive, we had radio. You would tune in the radio to hear the British invasion. In addition, you'd have to listen to stuff on top. I can sing every lick of Hello, Dolly by the version by Louis Armstrong, Strangers in the Night by Frank Sinatra. I don't like those songs. But I kept listening to radio to hear what I wanted to. Today, you don't have to listen to anything you don't want to. I use this example all the time, and this is a specialized audience. I'll say to someone, okay, sing a Taylor Swift song. They can't. Name 2 Taylor Swift songs. She's one of the biggest acts. She and Morgan Wallen, these are the biggest acts in the business. And most people are completely unaware of the music. This never used to happen before. So is all this hype about Taylor Swift's stadium shows? So she sells 50,000 tickets, and you do 30, stadium shows. What is that? 3 million people in a country of 330 million people? That's bupkis, as they say in Yiddish. That's nothing. There's a lot of money in that, okay? But it doesn't impact the culture at large. Now, let's talk Trump in America. He's his own type. Trump, everybody knows what's going on with Trump. Biden, not so much in the public. But after that, who is somebody? When they speak, we all know. There's nobody. So when it comes to music, there's no act that has ubiquity. Now, let's stay with Taylor Swift, even though it's a dangerous topic for me. She intentionally changed her paradigm. She was a country artist working with this woman, Liz Rose. I thought she was phenomenal. Writing, she was like a teenage Joni Mitchell. Then she had to write her own music to prove she could, which was not as good. Then she started, to this day, working with the best hit makers of all time, okay? Max Martin, you probably know. Max Martin is, fucking genius, and one of the few, he's a record producer, in case people don't know, but he also co-writes the songs. She became a top 40 person. So even if you talk about some of her biggest hits of the last decade, Shake It Off, or We Are Never Ever Going Out, Getting Back Together, or whatever, that's about as deep as the song goes. Whereas the old songs were something different. She's appealing to something different. These people, I'm going to go one step further. When music was in its heyday, the people wrote and played the music. Today, the marketing okay, let me go back one step. You'll hear people say, what's wrong with the movie business? I could make a movie for $1 million and I could make in 20. They don't understand the concept of opportunity cost. The marketing and getting the message out is so difficult and so expensive that they're not interested in making 10 or $20 million. They want to step up. If they can't make hundreds of millions of dollars, they're not interested. The major labels are the same way. I just told you how hard it is to get noticed. And most of the old tools have decreased in importance to the degree they're important at all. Radio, newspaper, they've never meant less. So a major label has to spend an incredible amount of money just to get the record to be heard. Therefore, they massage the records. The big change in the recording contracts in the late 60s and early 70s was complete creative control, and the record had to come out. In terms of guarantee release, that disappeared a long time ago. Now you deliver the record, and the record company says, well, it's not quite there. Why don't you go write with this person? Why don't we go remix it? Because it's going to cost so much money and require so much person power to get it out there. That is the business we're in. Whereas some of the greatest records of all time, the inspiration came in a dream, and the record was cut for 10 cents, okay? It's capturing lightning in a bottle. That's what truly resonates. I'm not going to sit here and say that music does not have cultural relevance, but I remember where if you wanted to know which way the wind blew, you turned on the radio. You listened to music. That's not what's happening. If you want to know what's really going on with the culture now, I'd say go on TikTok. There is music on TikTok, and it can have great impact, but the platform is bigger than the music.
Great. Gonna throw another quote at you. The people who make it need it. They're not normal, they're flawed. They believe the success, the adulation will fulfill them, cover up that hole inside. And when they finally realize it can't, they stop being able to deliver. Before that, they are driven, capital letters. I agree, I've worked with a lot of artists in my time, but a lot of famous people are assholes. But why do you think that musicians make such abysmal human beings at times? And why does that make for such great art?
There are a couple of things here. Let's leave abysmal till the end. Okay? It is so hard to make it. Whatever level of success I have, there was a time in the 90s where I had less than $20 to my name, and I wrote a bad check for the rent. I had nothing. I happened to be a lawyer, okay? Theoretically, I was willing to sacrifice to that level. It is so hard to make it. Why am I doing what I'm doing if I want to be 100% honest? Because I didn't get the love from my mother I wanted. It's just that simple. I mean, you go to every person, they're looking for recognition. All the English rock stars of yore, they all said they did it to get girls. And I've hung with a lot of these people. Their conversation is terrible. They can barely talk. But they're on stage, they can get laid, okay? What you have to know is if you were a musician, this is your one and only shot. If you're a manager, if you're a lawyer, something happens, you're representing an act. The act falls apart, whatever. You can get a new act. If you're the musician, this is your one and only shot. I'll use the classic example, which you also won't know. In the 80s, when MTV ruled, there was this artist, Billy Squier. He had an album that was gigantic. I mean, as big as anything in the marketplace. And it was good to boot. Next album, he made a video where he was jumping on beds with a pink tank top, killed his career overnight, never had another hit. Basically left the business. Now you can see a little bit on oldies tours. He's Billy Squier. He fucked up. Whereas, The average person can go and do something else. So I've been fucked by artists myself. These people are desperate. This is their one and only chance. It's like we had this act, Demi Moore's husband, Freddie Moore, that's why she's named Demi Moore. In any event, we had them lock, stock, and barrel. We'd made a record. I hear through the grapevine, they're playing and Clive Davis is coming. No one told me. I go to the grapevine, I talk to Clive Davis, he didn't know there was a label involved. You know, it was the Act's one and only shot. As far as, you know, some of these people being, you know, you talk about abysmal, I would credit a lot of that to the fact that this is their one only shot, and if you have any level of success, and people are done ad infinitum, most of the people I meet are not just pure assholes. The other thing you have to understand is, what is your relationship? You live in Toronto, somewhat similar to Los Angeles. Los Angeles, you'll run into famous people all the time. If you go up to a famous person and say, hey, you know, I love your music, they're gonna clam right up. If you happen to know something, I mean, I had a long conversation with Joe Walsh, who's now a member of the Eagles. I happen to know he's a ham radio guy. And we were at a party, I started talking about ham radio. This guy would talk forever, okay? So there's a very distinct wall. Let me go one step further. I do not answer any email from someone unless I know you personally, or you're a famous person, or you're a famous person in the industry. Because 1 in 10 members of the public is certifiably insane. Certifiable. The only problem is you don't know which one it is. So the person who seems totally, I can tell you story after story of bad experience. And these people have nothing to lose. Going back to the era of MySpace. Some guy was emailing me, and I made the mistake of responding. And he then emails and says, you have to tell everybody to go to MySpace and listen to my songs because I'm in a contest. That, if you know anything about me, that's the opposite of anything I do. The guy emailed me a couple of times. So then I emailed back, listen, email me one more time. I'm going to tell everybody how bad you are, okay? The guy starts trashing me on MySpace. I get a hold of MySpace, get it taken out. He just started a new name. He's got nothing to lose. He hasn't got any money. You can't sue him. You can't stop him. So if you're an artist, they have dealt with all this crap ad infinitum. I remember I was here in Toronto, Canadian Music Week. A guy comes up to me. I'm literally sitting in a chair like this. And I talk pretty much just like the whatever, yeah, I'm not feeling that well, whatever. This guy started to trash me online. I said, I had a kidney stone. It's like, what do you want me to do? Okay, I had to fly out that day. But the other thing, one other thing I gotta say, okay, when you start moving up in this business, you have to have an identity. Otherwise people will crush you. When you hear the customer is always right, no, okay? You can't say yes to everything. You can't take everything. You know, I've had these examples where these people call up to intimidate you. They only respect you. Okay, I'll talk about, what's his name? Well, for this famous actor happens to be Canadian. We were at dinner, and he's giving me shit. I gave him shit back. Once I gave him shit back, we were best friends. Gives me a big hug, can't wait to see you again the next time. But otherwise, they'll run right over you. So I don't think the average artist is abysmal. The other thing is you get a lot of people who are burned out because you have a certain level of success, and once again, to the end of that thing, it does not solve all your problems. It just doesn't. And usually after you realize that, you know, the greatness is gone.
Let's talk about A&R. Okay. Used to be, not that long ago, a couple of decades ago, you'd see them out prowling the clubs, looking for talent. Now they're scraping TikTok and asking about your socials. So what do you make of the way talent's assessed now, and whatever happened to artist development?
You got a couple of things there. Let's start with A&R. A&R used to be about finding talent. Now everybody knows who the talent is. That's the nature of the, or as Jimmy Buffett recently passed, called the coconut telegraph. It's like everybody, the power is signing these acts. There are certain people, I remember this guy Jason Flom, he's got this band Greta Van Fleet, he's got a Lava Records, he's got a long history of unbelievable success. Go on and on. Kid Rock goes on. So in any event, I remember he had his label, then they made his head of Atlantic Records. And Warner was run by this guy, Roger Ames. And he ran all of the Warner Music Groups. And Jason got blown out. And I said to Roger, I go, is Jason done? And he goes, no. Once you have the power to know how to sign talent, that's something that doesn't go away. Meanwhile, Jason went on to sign Lord. And let's start with the A&R person. I don't believe in A&R person. I don't want anything to do with an A&R person because they have no power. The A&R person will jerk you all fucking day long. I want to talk to the person who can write the check. Okay? So, assuming the A&R person is interested, well, get your lawyer to call the head of the label. You'll find out immediately. They going to sign you, or is this guy jerking you off? I get the chapter and verse of people jerking you off. So the business is completely flipped for the reason I mentioned earlier. The opportunity cost is so extreme. Never have the major labels, which are the only people who really employ A&R people, never have they put out less product. So they want you to prove yourself. They want to know they want to basically know, do you have a fan base? And if you don't have a fan base, they're not interested, no matter what they say. They want to believe that you started it. So as far as artist development goes, I mean, this was a big bitch for about 15 years. The major labels have never had less power, nor have they have nowhere near 100% of the market because a lot of their numbers are inflated because they distribute independent labels, okay? So yes, there was an era where their concept of artist development was take an album from 0 to 100. Most people today, other than the thin layer of stuff on Spotify Top 50, which is mostly hip hop or pop, okay, they've been at it for years. They've been developing themselves. As they say, one of the classic cliches is, it's not music friends, it's music business. They only want to talk about the money. If you can generate money for them, they will listen to you all day long. If you're just a good person, you got a good record, who gives a fuck? Okay? I'm glad we're having a good time. Can you generate any money? Let's go one step further. These three companies, the three majors, Universal is public, Warner is public, controlled by this Russian guy, Sony is part of Sony Music. No one there has a stake in the game. There's no one named Sony, there's no one named Universal. Warner's gone long ago. So how do these people get paid at the top? They get a guaranteed salary, and the people at the top, 7 figures, it's good. And then they get a percentage of the upside. This is their money. They get to keep. Their goal is to have enough revenue come in so they can make more money. If you don't fit in that paradigm, they are not interested, no matter what they say. And to go one step further, if they don't generate that kind of cash, they're going to get fired anyway. However, you can do it yourself now. If you don't make, Canadian market's a little bit different, it's a little bit more open, but on the world market, if you don't make top 40 music, which is hip hop and pop, you don't need the major label. Forget the fact the major label's not going to even sign you to begin with. You have to grow it yourself. And if you're looking for people always tell me, I don't have the money, I don't have the money. Wait a second, you got a computer? Yeah, everybody has a computer. It comes with GarageBand on it. You can get your music on Spotify essentially for free through these and all the other streaming services. So either you're making music. You think it's great. Okay? Your parents love you. Your friends love you. Put it up on any one of these services. Does anybody else listen? No. Chances are the music's wrong. Because we have an entire population, never mind the music business, that is hungry for something good, dying for something good. What they want most is to discover something and tell all their friends about it. I certainly do. But I find something, I go, wow, I got to tell everybody about this. So is anybody telling anybody else about your record? If it's out there and available, even if it's just on YouTube, your friends, there should be some level of, get it going. If there's not, either you're not good enough or you have to change what you're doing. The marketplace has certain truth there.
Great. I'm going to quote Frank Zappa instead of you. Writing about music is like dancing about architecture.
Absolutely.
Which means, not that I have to explain it, but it's a pointless exercise. It's futile. And I know you've said many times much the same about students going to school or university to study the music business. But they're here. They are studying the music business. So what advice can you give them, given that they have made that choice?
There are two things here. The dancing about architecture, although I do, a couple of things. Although I do write about the music itself, I write about it from a fan perspective. I didn't go to Berklee College of Music, certainly took piano lessons, played guitar or whatever, but believe me, that's not much of a credential. So you can read people who analyze the music on a musical level far beyond the people who make it. That, I believe, was Frank, and I happen to be a big Zappa fan, that is to be Frank's big point. I'm mostly writing about the music business, but when I write music, let me give you one more example. I'll go to a show, okay? The reviews you read in the show about shows in the major newspapers are frequently worthless because I'm not a fan of everything. And if you send me out, well, there's a job, why don't you go to the Greek Theater, which is about 5,000 people, not quite, in Los Angeles, and tell us what you think. Who gives a shit what I think, okay? It's what the people who pay think, okay? Peter Gabriel's on tour, usually does incredible shows. Talking to someone last night, how was it? Well, he played new music and it's not even out on record yet. That's what a fan had to say. So I'll give it from a fan perspective. Okay? That's what's interesting to me. What people have to realize, there is a music business. It is very hard to stay in. If you want to be a worker, be in the music business, get a job in publishing. That's where the songs are. A lot of people there work for a really long time. Everything has changed, but continuing on this theme, get a job in the live business, which to a great degree is run by Canadians, Live Nation. And because there's always going to be live gigs, especially now more than ever. The Polestar, which is gives you all the statistics on the grosses. You'd be stunned how many people are selling tickets, don't have any record deal at all. As I said, I could go through them right now. Or then you have acts where the record's irrelevant. Tedeschi Trucks, they can sell 5,000, if not more, tickets everywhere. The records don't mean anything. So you could go in on that level. If you're going to work at a record company, let's talk the majors, which, as I say, are a smaller footprint than ever before. The businesses have totally changed. When there were 6 major labels, okay, in the last century, they would always hire new people who would blow everybody out and get a whole new team. And there are plenty of people who went from label to label to label. Things have solidified now. If for no other reason, okay, these are things that come up all the time. You'll say, I want to go to a show. You're in the business. Can you get me free tickets? There are no free tickets anymore. None. When you talk to the promoter, they call it a no-comp show. We can get you tickets, but you got to pay for the tickets. The record company, okay. Zach Bryan is one of the biggest acts going today. I've seen him, and they call me again. He's going to play at Crypto, which used to be called Staples, the big arena in Los Angeles. Okay? So, I'm dealing with someone there. The last time Zach Bryan said, just go direct to me. This is the guy who runs the company. But the guy tracked me down. I said, okay, listen, I want a good seat because the previous time around, they didn't give me a good thing. And he said, okay, I don't need to go through every detail to get to the point here. The guy emails me at the last minute and goes, do you want to sit in the suite or do you want a seat? We're making our ticket buy and we're nailing it down. The labels buy the tickets. Since recording's so bad, they don't buy that many tickets. You want a good seat, get it from the promoter. The label, it's like a joke. The label's a second-class citizen at the gig. So we're going through these opportunities, even at this late date, in a mature business, okay? Used to be people were starting record companies all the time. People were starting new independent promoters. Where things have solidified, this is an entrepreneurial business. I know this guy manages Logic, lives in Long Island, went to college to play soccer, and then graduated, wasn't good enough to go pro, so I didn't want to be a music manager. He combed social media till he found Logic, who lived in Maryland. Took a train down to Maryland. Logic was nobody. He was a guy who posted on social media. He signed Logic. Logic ended up playing the award show. This guy was the manager. He was everywhere. And if you have a hit record, people are calling you because he was entrepreneurial. When I do these things, usually, my number one rap is quit, don't go in the music business. Really, I'll give you an example. I went to law school in Los Angeles, and the very first day, and I didn't want to go, it was a bad spot in my life, the career counselor said, if you're here to get into entertainment business, drop out today. Well, this was depressing to me because I didn't want to go to begin with. What I found out was I was the only person there who really needed to be in the entertainment business. The average person said, well, this sounds good. I'm in Los Angeles. No, it's the same thing. There's a great song by AC/DC. It's a long way to the top if you want to rock and roll. Getting beat up, getting stoned, getting broken bone. It is nearly impossible. Let's go one step further with entrepreneurial. This is a business built on talent. I know this guy, he was an A&R guy forever at RCA Records. Well, English guy. How'd you get in the business? Well, I saw the Beatles and I wanted to sign the new Beatles. 40 years later, never found the new Beatles. There are great managers everywhere. We're looking for great talent, not great managers. So if the person who lives next door is a phenomenal talent and everybody needs a manager, I can give you 20 reasons why. You attach yourself to that talent, the doors are going to open. Whereas if you don't knock on doors of management comes, I'm a great manager. Who gives a fuck? Okay? I come in with great talent, oh, we'll make a deal. Well, I've never managed anybody before. If you don't get squeezed out because you don't play the game right, it's like there are opportunities. So this is an entrepreneurial business. People are willing to work for free. People are not willing to work as garbage people for free. They'll get somebody else to select the equipment. They'll get somebody else to do everything. Okay? So staying in is very hard. This isn't like working for the gas company or working for Google or anything. This is something that people are willing to work for free. So the best way is to be entrepreneurial and to find your way. And having said that, it's incredibly difficult. I can tell you, we could stay here probably till the end of the session as I recite the names of people who made hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in the music business who are no longer in the music business. I could also tell you about a lot of those people flat broke, committed, got divorced, etc. These are people have big profiles. The wheels change, they're out.
Let's flip to the artist side of the equation. Back in August, you wrote a piece called The Ladder. Do you remember that one?
Go with the last one.
Well, the ladder. Do you
Keep
remember?
going.
It was a step-by-step.
Oh, the ladder. Yeah.
I've got a copy if you want to refresh your memory.
No, I remember. I just didn't hear what you said. Yep, the ladder.
So
And I
for,
wrote
you know, a
something
lot
out,
of the
right.
students are musicians or are artists, and it was a really good kind of how-to, step-by-step, and to the extent you remember it, maybe you can
I
summarize
do
it.
remember. I just didn't hear what you said.
Yeah.
So what's the question?
Can you kind of summarize what the ladder is?
Okay, I was talking about the different steps that it takes to get to the top. It starts with the music. It was what I was saying earlier. Does your music get a reaction? There's going via recording is more difficult than ever before and pays fewer dividends than ever before. Now, let's just talk someone who can play live, and we'll leave the recordings to the end. First, is anybody listening? If you're getting no reaction, nothing's ever going to happen. Even if you can play one night and get all your friends there, no one cares. The key is, can you play and grow an audience? I can talk to you about all kinds of bands. I'll give you one of my favorite examples, also with AC/DC. AC/DC was going to go on a tour in the 70s in England, in clubs, opening for Paul Kossoff, who was the guitar player in the band Free. On his flight, Kossoff's flight from New York to London, he died. Okay, so AC/DC is there. AC/DC is in a club. My friend is the agent, okay? AC/DC plays, there are fewer than 10 people in the audience. If you know AC/DC's routine, it's one of those bands that's sustained. You have Angus Young, he's playing, he's got the schoolboy outfit, they carry him around on the guy's shoulder. They do the complete act to fewer than 10 people. Okay, 45 minutes goes by, done. The fewer than 10 people run out of the building. My friend is the agent. He's like, what the fuck? Second set, you couldn't get in. All those 9 people left and called people said, you're not going to believe this. You've got to come down and see this act. And that's what, this is pre-cell phone, that's what got everybody, just to go one step further, my friend got fired as the agent anyway. Okay? So we talk about this business. So is there a reaction? You play live. If you're any good, who was I talking to the other day? Somebody who started off said, let me play here, okay, on a weeknight. And then the following week there was more business, and they got it to the point where the guy was going to play on the weekend because people wanted to see that person. No one's got enough friends to keep business busy for 7 nights a week, okay? So there's that reaction. Let's say you get that, okay? This is a club. You're going to know other acts, and you're going to meet people and say, well, listen, you're big in the club 50 miles away. Why don't I open for you there, and you'll open for me here? You trade favors amongst your friends. You build a certain amount of audience. If you can draw tickets, an agent will find you. Agent takes 10% of the revenue. They're looking for something that can sell tickets. You're not going to start off with someone at Wasserman, WME, CAA probably, but there are local agents that are going to book you. As it starts to grow, people are going to start kicking around. Managers, labels, etc., they're going to be interested. This is how it happens today. Happens from the ground up. And you have to climb that. Now, there are different, you can make, there's the guy who did Fireflies, there's The Weeknd, there are people who, Weeknd's already a little old. There are people who start off with a track, and people glom onto that track. Today, if you have no association with somebody else, you know, they're not playing on your record, or you're not on their record label, you're going to make it via social media. The #1 platform today is TikTok. If you do that, that's a reaction medium. If you talk to anybody, okay, the way TikTok works, which is different from YouTube, is they give all the new posters a chance. So you might say, hey, I have no following on YouTube, on TikTok, they're not going to promote me. But their business is they find something hot, they'll promote it, okay? So if you create something good and they find people reacting, they'll blow it up for you. Now, once you blow it up, blowing up once is pretty good. There's a few examples like Lil Nas X that can make it on one track. But a lot of these people, you do it a couple of times, people are going to be interested. You have to demonstrate that you can do it first.
Okay, let's talk about a topic you've been writing about a lot recently, and that is death.
Okay.
Death of our musical heroes. It happens almost weekly. You write beautiful eulogies. You know so much about these artists, and they're really well received. You also seem somewhat obsessed with your own demise, and that's something I can relate to. I'm 2 years older than you are. But thinking about the music, you know, we still listen to Beethoven, we still listen to Mozart. It was the fantastic music that we grew up with is going to die with us, and if it does, who cares? We'll be dead.
I'm not sure what the question is.
Do you think the music, the music we've been talking about, you think it will survive? Do you think there'll be an audience for
There's
it?
different perspectives. In the next 100 years, what will survive? The Beatles. Beyond that, I don't want to say anything. Steve Jobs has already been forgotten. This is a young artist, Steve Jobs died at 2011. Malcolm Gladwell pegged that. Not a big fan at this point of Malcolm Gladwell for different reasons, but he said, oh, Steve Jobs not going to be remembered 50 years from now. He's not. Steve Jobs was everything in 2011. He was a business person, and tech, everything is superseded. So most stuff, you know, there's a band called C Train from the 70s. They do the best version of a song called Willin' by Lowell George, originally Little Feat. That song survives. It's got a line, you know, it's a truck driving song. I've been from Tucson to Tucumcari to Tehachapi to Tonopah. 1 million people have done covers. I'd be stunned if one person in this room knows the band C Train, okay? Kenny Loggins used to be with this guy, with Jim Messina, used to be in Buffalo Springfield. They made great records. Those records were completely forgotten. Kenny Loggins. Let's go to the 90s. Chumbawamba, Tub Thumping. Incredible record. People don't even remember the record anymore. People aren't really even playing that record. So, just to talk about things with certain longevity, there's this great eerie song from the 60s, Walk Away Renee. That sustains if it's really that great. But generally speaking, let me go a little bit deeper. Songs survive, records don't survive. The Beatles on the album Revolver have the last song is legendary, called Tomorrow Never Knows. It's only one chord. There are many songs today that are one chord or have no chorus, no significant changes. These are beat-oriented. I don't think they'll survive because historically that isn't what survives. What survives isn't a record that's good to listen. If it's a song that everybody can sing, if it's a song that, you know, plants itself in their brains, that tends to survive. But just going back to your issue, I mean, the older you get, you start saying, well, civilizations survive. I mean, you guys live in a fucked up world, whereas you're most concerned about fairness, ecology, global warming, and people my age, if they do anything, they pay lip service. They don't give a fuck. Okay, what kind of world is that? But that's the same world where you can create something new. The great thing about the internet, let's say you slip right here. You come up to talk to me and you break your leg. Okay, I could look down and go, hey, you know, this is really my thing. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos. Don't go to the doctor. Let me set your leg. I can do it. You look at me and go, what are you, nuts? I want to go to the hospital. That guy trained, he has experience, and I would go to the hospital. In music, experience means nothing. Did you create a hit song? As I say, you could be nobody from nowhere with a manager from nowhere, without an agent, without a lawyer, and if you got it, people are going to find you.
Okay, well, let's move from death to something a little lighter. It's told you about this little game, this lyric game. I'm going to read a lyric. I'm sure you're going to recognize all of them. You can kind of spout on what that lyric means to
I'm going
you.
to start with my own lyric.
Okay.
There's the most famous Rod Stewart song is called Maggie May. And the line is, it's late September and I really should be back in school. Remember after graduating from college, being in Wyoming in a snowstorm on October 1st, thinking, wow, I really should be back in school. And walking around here, it really brought it back in September.
As it does for us every year. It's fall time. He not busy being born is busy dying.
That's Bob Dylan. This is interesting. Jan Wenner, who's a pariah today, he's got a book coming out of his interviews. And if you know Bob Dylan, which you probably don't, everyone says the album is Highway 61, which has got Like a Rolling Stone, but that quote comes from the album before, Bringing It All Back Home. There's a song called It's All Right, Ma. There's a movie, Easy Rider, legendary motorcycle pick, really a cult item in 1969 into 1970, and Roger McGuinn of the Byrds does a cover. But I could quote you lyrics from It's All Right, Ma. For them that obey authority, that they do not respect in any degree, who despise their jobs, their destinies, do what they do just to have nothing more than something they invest in. I wrote that in 1964. Still as applicable. There are all these great things. Dylan has been through a lot of changes, but that's what that lyric brings back.
You kind of alluded to this one earlier. Oh, I could drink a case of you, darling, still I'd be on my feet. I would still be on my feet.
Joni Mitchell, one-to-one, is a very difficult person. My interactions with her, I can say, you know, I was in Toronto, and I started talking about being here. She go, well, why'd you go to Toronto? Well, I went to Toronto. Well, why'd you do that? I mean, you get caught up in the things, whatever, but she made these great records. I give her credit for continuing to evolve, although I don't think the latter records are good. But Blue, For the Roses, Ladies of the Canyon, Court and Spark, brilliant records.
Couldn't agree more. Next one. There's nothing you can do that can't be done, nothing you can sing that can't be sung, nothing you can say, but you can learn how to play the game. It's easy.
You know, suddenly I can't remember who did that. Right. You know, the Beatles did everything first. The Beatles never sold out. One might say, well, they didn't know how to sell out or where to sell out. But they were the first ones. I'm reading this book right now by Naomi Klein called Doppelganger. And it's really hot. And she makes a big point that today everybody wants what they've already got. So it's a big challenge to break the mold. Okay, Garth Brooks, he put out a rock album called Chris Gaines because he didn't want to ruin his own career, and it wasn't successful, and he went back. When the Beatles switched, these were great leaps forward. They were the people today. Let's use The Weeknd. The Weeknd had a huge buzz based on a tape here in Toronto. He was successful. Now, The Weeknd worked with the same people Taylor Swift works with. Well, I got to have hits. I got to work with Max Martin. I got to work with this one. It becomes homogenized. That certainly wasn't the Beatles.
Meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
That's Pete Townsend. That's from 1971, Who's Next? That used to be the line, name a better rock album than Who's Next. I don't think you can. Yeah. Won't Get Fooled Again, that's that song. That's such a different era. It's post-Vietnam. Pete Townsend is a very deep-thinking guy. He's edgy himself, but that's what comes to mind.
You can check out any time you want, but you can never leave.
Okay, that's the Eagles. Eagles, very interesting. Hotel California. Right now, there's an article in the New York Times about Maneskin, although they pronounce it Moneskin, they say, how the band is so hated, yet so successful. You know, you have the movie with the dude, Jeff Bridges, saying he hates the Eagles. You have Steely Dan, turn up the Eagles, the neighbors are listening. The Eagles get a lot of shit, but they're the most successful recording band in America ever. Their greatest hits albums have sold more than Michael Jackson's. That is the power of the underlying song. As far as that record, Hotel California, Glenn Frey died and they had a memorial concert at the Forum that was off the record. And this is an interesting story. Don Henley told the story of the Eagles for an hour. This would be an incredible video. So Don Henley talks about being in this band, signed to the label, hanging out at the Troubadour, and then getting a call to play in Linda Ronstadt's backup band, which became the Eagles. The first gig was in Washington, D.C. The band got there the night before. Don Henley and Glenn Frey sat in their room all night. Glenn Frey told them, I'm going to start a band called the Eagles, and this is what's going to happen. Not only did that happen, if you listen to the story, you realize Don Henley never would have made it without Glenn Frey. Don Henley at this point is seen as the genius of the Eagles. But Glenn Frey was everybody's best friend. He was the coolest guy, made it happen.
Okay, time is our enemy right now, but we have time for a couple more questions. Another topic you talk a lot about is the internet and how it was supposed to bring us together, and instead it's reinforced a kind of tribalism. But on the positive side, we've got artists and fans directly connected to each other without the mediation of managers and record companies. So what do you think of the current relationship that artists have with their fans?
I'm very pro-internet. I think all the, relatively speaking, without getting the specifics there, all this internet backlash, it's like the New York Times, which is the #1 paper in the world. They're constantly printing these anti-internet stories. And it's funny. Then you'll hear people, well, I'm not upgrading my phone. I'm on an iPhone 6. It's like, these are people who are completely out of the loop. Everybody here knows the power of the internet. Forget calling up an Uber. You're in touch, maybe don't want to be in touch, but they're available with everybody you've ever known. Okay? You can reach everybody you've ever known. Yes, has this been at a cost of cacophony, of misinformation? Absolutely. But what you're talking about is we live in a world of cults. Back in the MTV era, which made acts more successful around the world than they'd ever been before, the concept was world domination. There was this band, The Police. Their manager's father had been in the CIA. They were not afraid of certain countries. They went where nobody went before. They went to India, they went to Egypt, etc., where people knew who the band was because of music television. Subsequent to that, everybody went to these places. And you would sit there, the people said, what I want is world domination. Nobody has world domination. Putin has world domination, maybe Zelensky, maybe Trump, not even Biden, where these people around the world, they know who they are. If you're a musical artist, you are a cult at best. Instead of looking up, you should look down. This is one thing that artists do so poorly. Serve your audience. This is less of an issue now, and I think it's great. Used to be there was a cycle. You put out albums every 2 years, then 3 years, then 5 years. So they would work the record single by single. So when the album came out in high school, well, you were in high school. The next album came out, you were married with children. It's like, well, you know, when I'm a fan, I get the record right away. Feed the fan. That's the person who's going to buy the tickets and everybody else tends to be a casual person. If you're hot today, you'll be gone tomorrow. The internet is what runs our lives. It's made the world decentralized, but the positive is far outweigh the negatives.
A couple more questions. It's a really short one. Spotify, hero or villain?
Excuse me?
Spotify, hero or villain? Friend or foe?
Yeah, I don't know if people are sophisticated, and I don't mean this as a put down, sophisticated enough in this room to understand all of these elements. Okay? Because if you're in this room, you're probably not already a successful recording artist getting royalties or in the business of distributing royalties. Spotify has a huge problem. It does not scale. Everything in tech that is huge is because it scales. Same thing with music. Music scales. Let's use it. Now records are cheap, but let's say I spent $100,000 to make the record, and we're in the physical era. Well, the first few records are expensive, but once I hit the millionth record or the 5 millionth record, man, it's all profit. Whereas with the streaming services, all of them, they pay the lion's share of the income to the rights holders, whoever they might be. Used to be 70%, it's certainly in excess of 60%. So no matter how many people are listening, they're paying that percentage. Let's talk about what's left. And it's not really that good business. You can follow the stock. It's not like they're rolling in dough. So you have, let's just, to make it easy, 60% left. Certain amount goes to the songwriters, the so-called publishing. Unfortunately, to make Spotify happen, and Spotify is the paradigm that everything else is built upon, they had to make deals with the major labels. And the major labels all have controlled publishing companies. And they were going to get paid on both ends. So they wanted more to go to the recording. So unfortunately, at this date, although in the United States they just raised the rates, the songwriters in general are not getting as much money as they should equitably in many people's minds. But let's just say there's 50 cents left after the songwriters, etc. If you make a direct deal through CD Baby, TuneCore, there are a number of people, they charge a very small rate, you're going to get all that money. You're going to probably wrote the song, you're going to get 60 cents. If no one listens, you're not going to get anything. But if you are a historical artist, many people will argue that streaming is a license, not a sale, and therefore, under all these contracts, you get 50% of the money. Well, some of these artists are on deals that are 8 or 10%. So they're getting 8 or 10% of 50 cents. And the label's getting the rest. There have been a ton of lawsuits about this. If you are a brand new artist making a deal with a major label, if you have unbelievable success, maybe you can get 50% of that 50 cents. The label gets the rest. Let's talk about the songs. There are two sides of a song. There's the publishing and the song and the writer. They can be the same person. So I hear all the time, man, my song got played on Pandora and I only got, 15 cents. Okay, do you own the song? No, I have a publisher. Let's wipe out 50%. Okay, did you write the song alone? No, I got 3 co-writers. Okay, so you got 1/4 of 50%. Yes, okay. Pandora does have an on-demand thing. Let's keep it with Spotify. When you choose a song on Spotify, that pays a higher rate than when it plays as radio. There are all these different levels. The people complaining are usually vastly unsophisticated, or very unsophisticated. I don't know if that really says. But let's go one step further. The paradigm completely changed. Thank God these artists are dying out. You don't hear it as much at this point in time. They used to sell records. Let's start from the beginning. I know a lot of these acts are household names. They never got any royalties. Never, ever. They lived off of advances. They never got royalties, but they're bitching about the royalties on Spotify. Then, they're old acts. No one's listening. Spotify pays if you listen. So people say, well, like my song got listened to 1 million times and I made almost no money. 1 million is nothing now. There's songs that are listened to 1 billion. Then you get those people in England, there's not enough money, the acts are going broke. Who says you're entitled to a living in music? You're not whatsoever. Just because you decide to be a musician, that doesn't mean that you can rent your apartment, drive a car. I can talk to people with major labels who have their cars repossessed, okay? Everybody isn't entitled to get paid. And then You have to know, if you are one of these hit artists, you're making a fortune. What did they say? The guy from, Richmond, north of Richmond, was making 40 grand a week off streaming services. Yeah, that's pretty good money. And he didn't have to split that money with anybody else. So then they say, well, Daniel Ek, he's a billionaire based on stock, and look at me, I'm a musician. I know Daniel Ek, he's not my best friend, but I know him pretty well. It's like, you don't know what he had to do to start Spotify. He camped out people's offices. He flew around the world. It was his idea, and he made it happen. We can talk about tax rates. We can talk about all this other thing. But it's like saying, well, Steve Jobs, he became a billionaire. What did the guy do? This is the way the game starts. The other thing about it is, if you want to make money, don't go into the music business. There's much better ways to make money than the music business, okay? If you're a fan, get a regular job. You can buy a ticket to every show. Go to the Scalper, 300, 500. You can sit right up front. You can be a fan. The other thing about it is, you have to know there's a distinct dividing line between the talent and everybody else. No one stops the guy who runs the insurance company as he walks down the street. He could be a billionaire. But some person who had a hit 20 years ago is broke. Oh, it's so-and-so. And that's worth a lot. That's what being a rock star is. And that's what many people want. So streaming services are the best thing that ever happened to the music business because people were stealing the music before. You get paid based on whether people listen or not, and the lion's share of the money goes to the rights holders. What's to complain about? Let's go, because there's so much misinformation. People say, well, you can make more per stream on Apple. That's not how they pay. There's a pile of money, and they distribute it based on what people listen to, okay? There are fewer subscribers who listen less on Apple. So yes, you divide it up a little bit more. Let's go one step further. It's well documented. The active listeners are on Spotify. So if you want to blow up, you have to be on Spotify. You're going to be on all of them anyway, but that's where you concentrate. Passive, adult listeners on Amazon. You can get all the music everywhere, although there's differences between these services. But it comes down to whether people are listening and where the active consumers are. Let's stop right now. Distribution's been figured out. This is all. There's nothing after streaming because it's on demand. The focus now is on the so-called software, which is the music. We are still in this era of cacophony because everyone's functioning under old rules. Well, let's find something, let's blow it up. Well, that's not the way it works. Okay? Today there are all these niches. However, the difference is you can spread something around the world. The best example here is Bad Bunny. Okay? This is a Latin act that should be a niche act. One of the biggest acts in the world, not only because there's so many Latin people, other people dig the music, and just from hearing it. So, Bad Bunny's almost a household name. That is the power of the internet.
Okay, last question. Your partner Felice recently compiled a birthday video for you. I saw it. I want to know how it felt to have Paul Anka, one of Canada's great pop singers and songwriters, not only sing his great hit for Frank Sinatra, My Way, but he changed the lyrics and personalized them for you. And then to top that off, at the end of the credits, Elton John wishes you a happy birthday. How'd that feel?
I was in shock. I mean, my girlfriend says, I got to show you this video. We were in Vail, we were skiing. I thought it was going to be about some trip or whatever. I literally had no idea. I was shocked. As I said, I wrote, I could retire right now. I don't know where I go from there. As far as Paul Anka's a good guy. You know, he's called me in the past, etc. Elton John, I get email from Elton. I remember I went to see Elton at Madison Square Garden. And this is on this final tour. And my friends are the promoters. Say, well, you ever met him face to face? And I said, no. I got to meet him. So you wait for all the dog and pony show to go up. They introduce me. He sits like on this throne like this. He gets up, baby, gives me a big hug. I mean, that's the shit I live for. I'd much rather have that than money. But whether people will respond or not, they listen. But just to go on, I've been doing this for a long time. What I'm trying to say is that's how long it took to get wherever I am, whatever that is. You know? Yeah, I mean, I'm not a household name. I'm not walking down the street hearing somebody stopping me. But it's an incredible amount of work. You know, there's a classic line from Jeffrey Katzenberg. He used to be number 2 at Disney. And Michael Eisner was number 1. After that, Katzenberg got involved with DreamWorks, and he had Quibi. He's not really making something active right now. But the line when Katzenberg worked there was, if you don't come in on Saturday, don't even think about coming in on Sunday. I have a friend who runs a label with acts. You'll know these acts, successful. It's in New York. He can't get good work. It drives him, good workers, it drives him crazy. He says, okay, band's in town, you know, show up at the gig. The people won't show up, okay? Or they say, well, you know, it's the weekend. It makes him crazy. If he finds anybody good, he keeps them and promotes them. There are, you know, what do they say, you know, X percentage of business is showing up. That is absolutely true. I can't tell you how many people I know were very successful, started out schlepping equipment, in some cases purely for free. And they showed up a number of times and said, well, you know, you're a good person. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Now, this is a different era from today. But if you're a hard worker, let me just go one step further because I know it's important to you guys. When you're going to go work for somebody, if you're an entrepreneur, you can be whoever you want to be, especially if you have a successful talent. If you're going to work for somebody, they don't give a shit how good you are. They want to know, first and foremost, can they get along with you? Do they like you? Are you a good hang? They don't want to hear that you know all the acts. That's almost, you know, cream. If you're a good person, smart person, they can teach you all that. But do they want to hang with you? I'll leave it at that.
Great, and I will leave it at that. Thank you, Bob.
Okay.
It's been a great hour and a half. Just a commercial. This series continues next week with Director X on Tuesday the 26th, I think. And we have Lindsay Unwin from Sol Expo, the Weekends Management Company, on November 21st. Professional music students, you're invited back to the lounge for a little more time with Bob. That'll happen like within the next half hour. So thanks for showing up, and we'll see you soon.